Hi everyone, it's Dan Hodges, naturalist for the Johnny Appleseed Park District. I'm so glad you could join me. I thought we'd talk today just a little bit about flowers. We've kind of done that pretty much all spring, but I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the nuts and bolts, the anatomy of the flower. And I've got a flower here. This is wild geranium. It's getting a little wilted. I got distracted yesterday by a bumblebee, but we'll see what we can do with this little flower. Here, we're looking just at the side. This is wild geranium, Geranium maculatum, and we're going to take it apart. But you can already begin to tell that we've got several different parts of the flower here. Some of them are repeated, and you can see multiple sort of similar structures here. And then obviously there are some that are not necessarily repeated. Before we start with kind of what's inside the flower, look at the outside. Here we are. These green sepals are what cover the flower before it opens up and blooms. Sometimes the sepals look like the petals and they give them a different name, but for the most part you have that kind of green sepal there. This, by the way, the stem, the stalk that the flower is on, is called a peduncle, which I don't think you necessarily need to know, but it might make a good icebreaker when we start having social functions again. And then, of course, you can see, obviously, the back of these petals here. These petals, their main function is attraction. So the petals here are mainly serving to attract pollinators to come to the plant. Wind-pollinated flowers that just disperse pollen on the wind, a lot of trees, grasses, they don't have petals, and at least not showy ones like this, to help attract other animals to it. In fact, these here, you can kind of see the nectar guides. You see the lines, the sort of pattern on the petals here. That's to help guide bees and pollinating insects towards the center of the flower where the nectaries are. These little stalks here with a big round kind of thing on the top, these are the stamen. There you go. Stamen consists of a filament, which is that long stalk, and an anther, which is this bulbous thing on the top, and they produce pollen. This is the male part of the flower. So pollen is produced by the male part of the flower. This called the stamen. And for geranium, there's 10 stamens, and different flowers will have sort of different numbers. Usually, there's more stamens than the female part. There's more male part than the female because releasing pollen is a lot less energetically expensive than making and developing eggs into seeds. So here you see several stamen, and actually, let's get a closer look at some of this pollen. I think this will be fun. There you go. So you can see the individual pollen grains along the anther of this wild geranium. That you can see the filament just behind. We'll kind of focus back there. You can start to see, we'll follow this filament all the way back to here. So this is where it starts, and it curls upwards. And there you go. That's the stamen comprised of the filament and the anther of the male part of this geranium flower. So here I've taken all the petals off, and you can see we're left with the green sepals. And then you can see the male part of the flower, these anthers on long filaments together called the stamen. But now you begin to see this sort of star-shaped portion at the end of the female part of the flower. I'm going to cut this open. We're going to look inside. The female part of the flower together is called a pistil. So the pistil is the female part, the stamen is the male part. So here I've isolated that female pistil, that female portion of the flower, and I'd like to show you, because I've kind of dissected it enough that we can see. Here is, this is called, at the end here, this is called stigma. And as we move just a little bit further back, there we go. This long sort of tube, this long stalk in the middle, the stigma receives the pollen grow a tube down the style, and this leads back into the ovary, which I believe that we see the ovules there. So these are what will develop into seeds. For this particular flower, it's really cool. These portions curl back, and eventually when the seeds are ripe, they fling the seeds in explosive dispersal. But what we've seen here is basically what flower looks like with a little bit of variation, or at least the typical flowers. The female portion consisting of the stigma, the style, and the ovary with the ovules inside. By the way, when those seeds develop, it's the ovary that becomes most of the fruits. Like, for example, an apple, the ovary is what's the white fleshy part, the part that we eat, that surrounds the seeds there in the middle. What I thought was interesting down here is, if you can see these little pools, those are the nectaries. That's the reward for a pollinator visiting this flower. Pollinators, a lot of them, bees for example, are going to eat the pollen, but then they like to drink that nectar. That sugary water basically is a great source of energy for a lot of pollinators, and that's kind of what they're doing, is they're drinking that, and in the process they're rubbing up against the stamens, the male part of the flower that's producing that pollen. They're rubbing up against that and getting pollen on themselves, which they'll take back to the next flower. So there you have it. Different parts of the flower, male and female. Now this is kind of the typical flower. So there are many flowers that don't exhibit quite this anatomy. You'll find some flowers that are male and some are female. Some plants that are male one year and female another. So you'll find a lot of variability out there. But hopefully you get the chance to go out and experience this. This is a big part of what makes the world go round, flowering plants. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate you being here. And don't forget to get outside.